My name is András. I'm very happy to participate in this year's Polyglot Conference. And the title of my presentation is Creating Your Simple Book. In other terms, how to transform, change, complete an existing language book. Now, some words about me. I come from Hungary. I've been working in supply chain in the last couple of years, and my hobbies are traveling and, of course, languages. In terms of languages, I've reached the C level in the main Western European languages and Russian. I'm on intermediate level in other Eastern Central European languages, and I've started to learn some rare languages like Lithuanian, Albanian in the last years, and also I started to learn Arabic and Chinese. Now, the topic in close-up. What is it creating your simple book? So I will tell you some of my tips, my hacks about how to change a book, how to highlight important things, how to make invisible what is less relevant, and how to add notes if some other notes are needed. Well, my presentation is dedicated for beginners because we are speaking mainly about language books for beginners. And in my presentation, I will show you some examples I've taken from the printed books I have used. Of course, there are different books, and I can say that in some books there are a lot of interventions to be done, and in other books much less intervention is needed. It depends on the book. Okay, and which are the benefits of all this? Why to create your simple book? Well, first of all, you will get a more focused view on the basic simple content, and you can avoid complexity. And if you get these changes, you will get a better fit to your methods, and you will get a book which will be more interesting for you. And of course, it will allow you easier repetition later. And finally, you will get, with all these changes, your personal book that you can use with joy, with satisfaction. And if you have more happiness in the process, you will get better results finally in the learning process. So these are the benefits of all these changes I will speak about. Now, the summary of the hacks. There are 6 recommendations, and I think the most important is highlighting important content in a language book. Of course, there can be words or sentences which are not needed yet or not needed at all. You can cancel them, you can cross them out. There can be sentences which you can consider irrelevant, you can cross them out, of course. Well, the other recommendations are the following. There are sometimes there are related words coming from the same category. Like here in the example, in Russian, there are some vegetable names here which are important, but there are other vegetable names like garlic or, I don't know, aubergine, which I consider much less important. The 5th recommendation is avoiding synonyms and antonyms. And the 6th one is how to focus on a few exercises in order not to do all the exercises, in order not to get bored finally. Okay, so after this introduction, I will start to speak in more detail about the first one, which is marking important content. Firstly, a little bit of theory. What is it? Well, in each lesson, in each text, I recommend you to choose the most important words and about 3-4 important sentences. And if you have done this, you can write the translated version of these words and these sentences further on the page, like this. So in the bottom or on the right side or wherever you want. And then, third step, you have to use these translated words in order to repeat lessons later, in order to activate your vocabulary more efficiently, more quickly. So this is the essential idea about why to mark important content. And now, I think the most important thing is to show you some examples taken from my books. So here we have some Portuguese sentences where on the right side you can see some words in Hungarian with a translation. The example is about apple, which is alma in Hungarian, maçã in Portuguese. And what I did is to take the most important words from here and to put it there on the right side. Later, when I will make repetition, I just take all these words and I will try to translate them back into Portuguese. Okay, now another example about sentences. An example from my Albanian book, where I have some important sentences like how much does 1 kilogram of apple cost? Sorry, I didn't translate everything into English, but you can see the translation in Hungarian. So for example, sa kustojnë të gjitha, how much does it cost altogether? In Hungarian, mennyibe kerül az összes. And once again, later, when I come back to these texts and I want to make some repetition, I just take the Hungarian version and I try to translate them back into Albanian. And once again, these are the most important sentences in the text. Okay, the last example is when I have complete texts and I consider them as important. Here, an example from my Finnish book, where I put here on the bottom the whole text. Well, I will not tell you about this, but you can believe me that all these sentences are quite important, and I even underline the important words there. Okay, I think this part is quite clear, so we can go to the next tip, which is omitting not needed words. Because in every language book, written even with the best intention, it can happen that you just have words which you consider not so important or urgent to learn. But once again, if you find a needed word, you have to highlight it, you have to underline or circle it. This is the previous point. And if there's a not needed word for you, once again, this is something personal. A word can be needed for you, but not needed for someone else. Please don't hesitate to strike it through. And the question is, okay, but how do I decide whether it's needed or not needed? I think in most cases, you can just imagine whether in a common situation and common everyday situation, I will use it or not. So do I need it right now for my everyday topics or not? Or the next question can be, will I ever use this word or not? So if the answer is no, in this case you can easily omit these words. Okay, and another important point is that if you decided to cancel a word that it is not needed anymore, you have to cancel it not only in the lesson, but in the word list as well, and also in the next lessons if they appear again, until the moment when you decide that, okay, now I need this word. And this is an important last point here, that all these words which you consider not needed now, you can approve them later, even in the next lesson. Just it can happen that one word is not needed right now because a lot of similar words come up in the text, and then you think that, okay, I will mix them up, so I will not learn everything, but I want to learn them later. So you can approve it later, all these words. Okay, and after this theory part, once again, the examples. The example comes from Finnish, where I have the following text, the following sentence. Kari's favorite dishes are mashed potatoes, pepper steak and salad. In Finnish it would sound like Karin lempiruoka on perunasauce, pippuripihvi ja salatti. Okay, so potatoes are important words. I've learned it earlier, so I will not touch it. However, mashed potatoes is not important for me, so I cancel it. Another word is steak, which is important. I keep it. But pepper steak, so pippuri, pihvi, together seems not so important, so I strike the word pippuri through. So my final sentence will be Kari's favorite dishes are potatoes, or even without potatoes, favorite dishes are steak and salad. Okay, another example now. The other example comes from Lithuanian, where I have here a sentence. On the first floor, there's the sitting room, dining room, mom's workroom, and the kitchen. Pirmame aukšte svetainė, valgomasis, mamos darbo kambarys. Sorry if my pronunciation is not so perfect, but okay, I'm not sure that a lot of people can check it. It's a rare language. Unfortunately, it's a very nice language, Lithuanian, but not many people learn it. Okay, so come back to this. Let's come back to this example. Here, similar words like sitting room, dining rooms, mom's workroom come up at the same place at the same time. So I considered one of them not so important to learn now. So I cancelled valgomasis, dining room, and I cancelled it in the word list as well, as you can see here. Okay, and now let's go to the third recommendation, which is omitting complex sentences. This is quite similar to the previous point. So the process is the following. You read the text, you choose complex or irrelevant sentences, you strike them through, so you make them almost invisible. Almost, because maybe you will need them later, so please do it with a pencil. Please do it so that it could be restorable. And another point, I want to stress it in general. If you want to strike through something, if you consider something not so needed, please don't regret to lose it, because you will not lose it finally. You will restore them if necessary. And if in the next lessons the same grammar or word come up, you can just keep it, approve it. So don't regret to lose this. And another important idea here, it can happen that text is too complicated, too much grammar, too many unknown words, or on the contrary, the text is too easy, nothing important there. So in this case, I recommend you to omit the whole text. Don't bother to the difficulties, or take it easy. So the examples here, well, it's Arabic, as you can see on the left side, with German translation, with a book I've bought in Germany lately. Here in the first part I have a common situation where it's about booking a room for how many nights, etc., etc. So it's quite important. However, later the situation changes, is more complicated, because they speak about some cleaning service, about some pick-up service or something like this. So these words and the situation itself, it's not so important. That's why I just cancelled it. Okay. The next example comes again from Portuguese, where I have some sentences. Sentences I consider not so important. I take just one example here. This one, which is in translation into English, she made me get to know the whole city. So as you can see here, there's a quite complicated structure, which is causative. And I didn't keep the structure, the sentence, because I considered it is one of the first lessons. I just thought that it's not so important in this stage of the learning process. Okay? And after this, the recommendation number 4, which is avoiding related words. Well, related words can come from the same category, like the days of the week, the names of the months. You can see here examples from Croatian, where the names of the months are quite complicated. And I can add to this that in other Slavic languages, like Polish, Ukrainian, the situation is similar. And in order to make it even more complicated, let's take the example of October in Croatian, which is listopad, and the same listopad means November in Polish. So you can see that this is quite complicated and a lot of reason for mixing up. So other examples here, related words could be colors, fruits, vegetables, family members, animals, numbers, etc., etc. And the recommendation here is don't learn them all at once. You can keep part of them and strike through the rest. After this theory part, again the examples. Okay, sorry, this is Finnish Russian, because I learned Finnish from a book I bought in Moscow. And these are days of the week, like понедельник, вторник, среда, четверг. In Finnish it would be maanantai, tiistai, keskiviikko, torstai, etc., etc. And the second part of this list seemed to me so similar that I just decided not to keep it for the moment. Of course, later I learned, I think 2 or 3 lessons later, gradually these words came up, like Sunday or Saturday, which are very important words. And I learned them later in a different context, but not here. And another example, also from Finnish, the names of the months. Here, I consider the summer months as most important because, you know, in Finland the summer is more pleasant, in winter it's too cold, it's a little bit sad. So kesäkuu, heinäkuu, elokuu, like June, July, August, seem to me the most important words here. And I didn't focus on the rest. Well, I think it's quite clear. But let's see other examples, like the numbers in Chinese. Well, all the words in Chinese are so strange and so difficult at first sight, so you have to be careful. And here with numbers, well, numbers are very important to know, but in lesson 4 here, I just kept the 4 first numbers, and all the rest I learned later in other contexts. Okay, and the last example here comes from Lithuanian again, where in one of the first lessons I could see all the family members like mother, father, etc. Well, these are very important. I kept them like motina, tėvas, duktė, sūnus, etc., etc. But all the rest, like father-in-law, mother-in-law, especially because these are quite strange or quite difficult words, I didn't keep them. I omitted them. Okay, so I think it's clear about all these related words, and now we are going to the recommendation number 5, which is avoiding synonyms and antonyms. Well, it's quite simple, because if, for example, fast and rapid, these 2 words appear at the same time or in the same context or very close to each other, I recommend you to learn the simpler version, which is fast in our case. And there are other examples for synonyms, but really learn just one example, one word here. And there can be also antonyms. These are opposite words like close, open, hot, cold, begin to end, etc., etc. And here, which one to choose finally if they appear at the same time? Well, I think you have to positivize everything. Means, for example, if I take the example of close and open, I take the word open, which is more positive for me. It's much more positive to open something. And even another example, if you have to choose between begin and end, I focus on beginning, which is for me quite more optimistic. Okay, and now the examples again. Unfortunately, in a lot of books, I have quite a few examples here, and I really have to choose between them. Here in Arabic, I have yadab and yaruh. Both of them means go or to ride, and yadab seemed to me simpler here, and I chose yadab. Okay. Next example from Chinese, where you can see at the same place long and short, and I chose one of them. And similar example with little and small from Arabic. I think it's quite clear, and I hope you can follow my presentation and everything is clear so far. And the last recommendation, which is focusing on exercises, on not all the exercises, but on a few of them. I recommend you to choose about 20% of the exercises and not to focus on the rest of them. The next recommendation is to choose those exercises where you can activate more your skills, your vocabulary. And these are mainly translation exercises. In all books, there is at least one translation exercise. And I recommend it much more than exercises where you have to fill in gaps, fill in blanks, because they are not so efficient for me and you can get easily bored. And here, one more important thing, when you do an exercise and when you consider it important, you really have to indicate where is the solution in the section of the key, in the key section in the last part of the book. Because if you have to search for it and you lose time, you can be demotivated. So really you have to indicate where you can find a solution. And the most important thing is to go through all these exercises quite quickly when you make repetition. So once again, practice often with a part, with about 20% of the exercises, and practice rarely with 80% of the exercises. And after this theory part, the examples from Chinese. Well, you can see 3 exercises here, and the one in the middle is translation from German to Chinese. I have approved it, and I even indicated the page 156, where you can find the solution in the key section. So when I come back to the exercises, I take this one and I will not focus on the rest because, well, the first one is about modal verbs. You can easily confuse them. Actually, I have just learned one of them, which is können, and all the rest I have omitted for the moment. And the third one is about some words where you have to find the order in order to create a sentence. Well, for some people it can be interesting, for me it was not. And the last example here from Georgian, sorry for the letters, well, Of course, they are quite interesting, but at the same time difficult to learn. But it's great fun, believe me. Yeah, Georgian letters are very, very nice, and I like writing these letters. And here we have an exercise where you have to ask questions and you have to answer these questions, and you can do it on the basis of the text. However, the text itself was not so interesting, so I have just kept a part of the sentences, and consequently I underlined those questions where I kept a sentence, and I have also indicated here the page where I can find the solution for this exercise, which is page number 75. Okay, so gradually we are coming to the end of my presentation. Well, I hope that everything is clear so far. Now, before finishing, I will give you some general tips and I will summarize shortly. The first point I wanted to stress is, in general, when you start to learn languages, I recommend you to use a printed book, because it's where you can make some changes, you can add some notes, etc. So a printed book is very essential for start. The second point I wanted to stress is that you have to highlight and make visible what is relevant and important for you, not for somebody else, but for you. What you can consider as relevant can be not relevant for somebody else. You are creating your personal book. Finally, if you do this, and if you come back to the same lessons later, you make some repetitions, it will be easier and more efficient. And of course, you have to repeat things often. This is key, and this is very important for efficient learning. And the next point is, if you can consider something as not important, you have to be rather firm to exclude it and not to focus on it. Okay, I have explained it with some examples. And in general, my message and recommendation is that if you use a book and if you go through a language learning material at the beginner level and even later, you really have to get to the point, and you really have to imagine that you will use all this in simple, basic, everyday situations. So you have to think simple. So this is my final message. I hope that you have enjoyed this presentation. And now it's the section of questions. Don't hesitate to ask your questions. Thank you. Bye-bye.